The sunlight falls in dusty columns through the high windows of the Palatine Palace, illuminating motes of dust that dance like spirits of the dead. It is the year 41 AD, and a middle-aged man crouches behind a curtain, his breath shallow, his hands pressed flat against the cold marble floor. He has heard the shouts, the running feet, the clash of blades. He has heard his name spoken in whispers that were not meant for his ears. Now he waits, a man who never wanted power, hiding from the men who have just murdered his nephew. Outside, the Praetorian Guard search the corridors, their sandals slapping against stone, their voices echoing through chambers built for pleasure and prayer. The man behind the curtain is Claudius, stuttering scholar, family embarrassment, survivor of more purges than any living Roman. He does not want to be found. He does not want to be emperor. But the guards are drawing closer, and in Imperial Rome, being found can mean either a crown or a knife. He presses himself deeper into the shadows, listening to his own heart, wondering which fate awaits him when the curtain finally parts. To walk the corridors of the Palatine is to understand that in Rome, the line between king and monster was drawn in blood. The room is small by Roman standards, almost modest. On the morning of August 19, 14 AD, in the town of Nola near Naples, the master of the known world lies in a narrow bed, his breath growing shallower with each passing hour. Gaius Octavius, Augustus Imperator, father of his country, is dying at 75, and he faces death as he faced life, with calculation, with control, with the eyes of a man who has spent 45 years pretending to be something he was not. The room smells of herbs and sweat. Physicians hover at the edges, useless now, their art exhausted. Slaves move silently, changing linens, adjusting pillows, preparing for what comes next. And around the bed the family gathers, not out of love, but out of necessity. In Rome, the death of an emperor is not a private grief. It is a transfer of power, a moment of maximum danger, a hinge on which history turns. Augustus opens his eyes. They are still sharp, still watching, still recording. He looks at the faces around him. His wife Livia, the partner of 50 years, the woman who has schemed and suffered and sacrificed beside him. His stepson Tiberius, the reluctant heir, the man who would rather be anywhere than here. A few trusted freedmen, their faces wet with tears he does not believe. He speaks, his voice a whisper that cuts through the silence. Have I played my part well? Then applaud as I exit. It is a question and a command, a plea and a judgment. He has always seen life as theater, power as performance. Now on this final stage, he asks for the one thing he cannot command, genuine applause. The room is silent. No one knows how to respond. Augustus closes his eyes and does not open them again. The man who lies dying in Nola was not born to rule. He was Gaius Octavius, the son of a minor senator and a mother who was Julius Caesar's niece. When Caesar was murdered in 44 BC, Octavius was an 18-year-old student in Apollonia, studying rhetoric and dreaming of a quiet life. He had no military command, no political base, no claim on power except a name and a will that named him Caesar's adopted son. But he had something else, the cold, calculating patience of a man who knows how to wait. While Caesar's assassins celebrated, while Mark Antony gathered legions, while the Republic tore itself apart, Octavius watched and planned. He came to Rome not as a conqueror, but as a claimant, a boy demanding his inheritance from men who laughed at him. They did not laugh for long. The next 13 years were a bloodbath. Octavius, Antony, and Lepidus formed the second triumvirate and proscribed their enemies. 300 senators and 2,000 equestrians died. Cicero, the greatest orator of the age, was hunted down and killed, his head and hands nailed to the rostra in the Forum, a gift from Antony to the boy who had once been his rival. Octavius watched the head rot and said nothing. He was learning that power required silence. Then came the war with Antony, the naval battle at Actium, the lovers' suicides in Alexandria. By 27 BC, Octavius stood alone, master of the Roman world. But he understood something that every successor would forget, that Romans hated kings. They had expelled the Tarquins 5 centuries before and built a republic on their grave. They would not crown another monarch, no matter how much blood he shed. So Octavius invented something new. He called it the Principate, rule by the first citizen, not the monarch. He returned power to the Senate, restored the forms of the Republic, and kept the reality for himself. He became Augustus, the revered one, a title that suggested piety rather than power. He lived in a modest house on the Palatine, wore ordinary togas, walked the streets without guards. He pretended to be a private citizen while commanding the largest army the world had ever seen. And for 45 years, the pretense held. Now in the death chamber at Nola, the pretense is ending. Augustus has outlived everyone he loved. His nephew Marcellus died young. His grandsons Gaius and Lucius died before they could succeed him. His stepson Drusus died on campaign in Germany. The only heir left is Tiberius, the son of Livia from her first marriage, a man Augustus has never trusted and never loved. Tiberius stands at the foot of the bed, his face a mask. He is 55 years old, a successful general, a competent administrator, a man who has spent his life serving a stepfather who despised him. He has been forced to divorce the wife he loved, marry a woman he loathed, watch his own blood passed over for strangers. Now, at the moment of succession, he feels nothing but exhaustion. Augustus, in his last lucid moments, knows what Tiberius feels. He knows that he has created a monster, not in Tiberius, but in the system itself. The Principate depends on the fiction that the emperor is just a man, but the power of the emperor is king-like, and power, once granted, cannot be withdrawn. Tiberius will inherit not just the title but the isolation, the paranoia, the weight of being the sun around which the world must turn. The old man's eyes find Tiberius across the room. For a moment, something passes between them, not love, not respect, but recognition. They are both prisoners of the same cage. Augustus built it, Tiberius must live in it. After the death, the machinery of succession grinds into motion. Livia takes control, managing the transition with the skill of 50 years of practice. She has been the power behind the throne since the beginning, the advisor, the confidant, the silent partner. Now she becomes the priestess of Augustus's cult, the guardian of his memory, the bridge between the old reign and the new. The Senate meets. They debate, prevaricate, posture. They know that Tiberius has the army, the treasury, the Praetorian Guard. They know that resistance is suicide. But they also know that Tiberius wants them to beg, to plead, to offer him power he claims not to want. It is a ritual, a dance, a theater of submission. Tiberius plays his part perfectly. He hesitates. He demurs. He speaks of his age, his weariness, his unworthiness. He suggests that the Republic might function without an emperor, that the old forms might revive, that Rome might return to its roots. The senators, terrified by the prospect, beg him to accept. Finally, reluctantly, he agrees. He becomes Tiberius Caesar Augustus, the second emperor of Rome. But the performance leaves scars. Tiberius knows that the senators do not love him, that they would have preferred anyone else, that they accepted him only because they feared the alternative. He will never forget. He will never forgive. In the months after Augustus's death, Rome transforms. The modest house on the Palatine becomes a palace. The simple togas give way to purple. The man who pretended to be a citizen is revealed as a king. Tiberius, who wanted none of this, finds himself trapped in a role he never sought. He begins well. He consults the Senate. He governs justly. He refuses divine honors, insisting that he is merely a man. He seems, for a moment, to embody the Principate as Augustus imagined it, rule by consent, not coercion. But the shadow grows. The senators watch him too closely. The people demand too much. The family plots in corners, whispering of better heirs, cleaner successions. Tiberius feels their eyes on him always, judging, measuring, waiting for him to fail. The paranoia that will consume him begins to grow, a weed in the garden of his soul. In his private chambers, alone with his thoughts, Tiberius writes to the Senate. The letter is a masterpiece of ambiguity, a document that scholars will debate for centuries. He speaks of his burdens, his age, his desire for rest. He asks permission to retire, to leave Rome, to live quietly somewhere far from the throne. He does not mean it, or perhaps he does. Perhaps, in the dark hours of the night, he truly wishes to escape. The Senate refuses. They cannot let him go. The empire needs an emperor. The machine must continue. Tiberius reads their response and feels the trap close around him. He will never be free. He will never be safe. He will spend the rest of his life watching shadows, suspecting friends, destroying enemies, until the shadows consume him. In Nola, Augustus lies in his mausoleum, carved from marble, surrounded by the ashes of his heirs. He built an empire that would last 1,000 years. He did not build an emperor who could last a decade. The king is dead. The man who inherits his power must now become a king himself or die trying. And somewhere in the palace corridors, a young boy watches the adults scramble for position, for favor, for survival. His name is Gaius, But the soldiers will call him Caligula, little boots, and one day he will inherit everything. The madness is already in the walls, waiting for its moment. The king is dead. Long live the kings. The Palatine Hill casts a long shadow in the afternoons, reaching down into the forum where senators gather in whispered groups, where merchants hawk their wares, where children play games among the statues of heroes. In the year 23 AD, that shadow falls across the Senate house itself, a reminder that the power of Rome no longer resides in that ancient hall, but in the palace above. Tiberius has been emperor for 9 years, and already the Republic feels like a dream, a story told to children, a memory fading with the generation that lived it. Tiberius rules from the palace, but he does not govern. He receives reports, signs documents, meets with advisors, but the energy that animated Augustus, the constant calculation, the endless performance, Tiberius cannot sustain it. He is a soldier, not an actor. He wants to command armies, not manage senators. The daily grind of empire exhausts him. Into this vacuum steps a man named Lucius Aelius Sejanus, commander of the Praetorian Guard. Sejanus is everything Tiberius is not: ambitious, charming, tireless, ruthless. He has risen from an equestrian family to the second most powerful position in Rome by sheer force of will. He understands that in the palace, proximity is power. The man who controls access to the emperor controls the empire. Sejanus consolidates his position methodically. He convinces Tiberius to concentrate the Praetorian Guard in a single barracks just outside Rome, giving him a standing army at his command. He marries into the Imperial family, linking his blood to Augustus's. He fills key positions with his allies, his clients, his creatures. By the late 20s AD, Sejanus effectively governs Rome, while Tiberius retreats further into isolation. In 26 AD, Tiberius makes a decision that will shape the rest of his reign. He leaves Rome. He travels south, through the countryside, past Naples, until he reaches the island of Capri, a rocky outpost in the Bay of Naples, beautiful and remote, accessible only by boat. He tells the Senate he needs rest, that the cares of office have worn him down, that he will return when his health improves. He never returns. Capri becomes the shadow palace, the negative image of Rome. Here, Tiberius rules through letters and messengers, receiving reports, issuing decrees, but never appearing, never performing, never pretending. The senators who once begged for his presence now beg for his attention. They send delegations, write letters, offer prayers. Tiberius ignores them. He has found a freedom he never knew existed, the freedom to say no, to turn away, to be alone. But isolation breeds paranoia. On Capri, with no one to trust and nothing to do, Tiberius's mind turns inward. He begins to see conspiracies everywhere. The senators who write flattering letters, are they mocking him behind his back? The generals who report victories, are they building armies to overthrow him? The family members who visit, are they counting the days until his death? Sejanus in Rome feeds this paranoia. He sends reports of plots, of disloyalty, of treason. He names names, provides evidence, recommends executions. Tiberius, desperate and afraid, authorizes them. The trials begin. The treason trials of Tiberius's later reign stain the Roman memory for generations. Senators accuse senators, friends betray friends, families destroy families. The charge is always the same: Majesty, treason against the emperor and the state. The evidence is always thin. The verdict is always death. Tiberius on Capri reads the reports and approves the sentences. He does not witness the executions. He does not see the faces of the condemned, hear their final pleas, watch their blood spill on the stones of the Gemonian stairs. He is safe on his island, surrounded by sea and sky, while Rome tears itself apart. Sejanus grows more powerful with each death. The condemned leave vacancies, which he fills with his creatures. Their property is confiscated, enriching the treasury and Sejanus's allies. By 31 AD, Sejanus is effectively co-emperor, his statues erected throughout the city, his birthday celebrated as a public holiday, his name linked with Tiberius's in official documents. But Sejanus overreaches. He asks Tiberius for permission to marry into the imperial family, specifically to marry Livilla, the emperor's niece and the mother of potential heirs. Tiberius refuses. The request triggers something in the old man's mind, some buried instinct for survival. If Sejanus wants to marry into the family, he must want something more. He must want the throne. The destruction of Sejanus is a masterpiece of deception. Tiberius, from Capri, writes letters praising Sejanus, confirming his powers, lulling him into security. Then, on October 18, 31 AD, he sends a letter to the Senate that begins with routine business and ends with a thunderbolt. He accuses Sejanus of treason, orders his arrest, and condemns him to death. The Senate, caught completely off guard, acts with the speed of terrified men. Sejanus is arrested in the Curia, dragged to the Mamertine prison, and executed within hours. His body is thrown on the Gemonian stairs, where the mob that once cheered him now tears it apart. His children are killed. His statues are destroyed. His name is erased from public records. On Capri, Tiberius receives the news and shows no emotion. He has killed the man who saved him from the burdens of rule, the man who managed the empire he could not face, the man who was, in some terrible way, his only friend. The isolation that began as a refuge has become a prison. There is no one left to trust. The final years are the darkest. Tiberius remains on Capri, surrounded by astrologers and informers, seeing enemies in every shadow. The treason trials continue, accelerated now, consuming senators and equestrians with mechanical regularity. The old emperor, grown monstrous in his solitude, reportedly invents new tortures, new cruelties, new ways to make the condemned suffer. The sources from this period are unreliable, poisoned by hatred. They tell of orgies in the Capri grottos, of children kept for unspeakable purposes, of victims thrown from the cliffs into the sea. Some of these stories may be true, some may be fantasies. What is certain is that Tiberius, the reluctant emperor, the competent general, the man who never wanted power, has become a tyrant in spite of himself. In 37 AD, at the age of 77, Tiberius falls ill in a villa at Misenum near Naples. He seems to be dying. The courtiers around him, eager for the succession, begin to celebrate. Caligula, the last surviving son of the beloved Germanicus, waits to be proclaimed emperor. Then word comes, Tiberius has recovered. He is sitting up. He is asking for food. The courtiers panic. If Tiberius returns to Rome, he will know they betrayed him. They will die. So they act. Macro, the new Praetorian prefect, smothers the old man with his own bedclothes. Tiberius, who escaped so many plots, who survived so many conspiracies, finally meets the death he always feared, at the hands of those closest to him. The body lies in state, embalmed and dressed in imperial robes. The people of Rome, who have not seen their emperor in a decade, file past and pretend to mourn. They do not know what they have lost. They do not know that the man who follows, young, handsome, promising, will make Tiberius look like a saint. On Capri, the villas stand empty, the grottos silent, the cliffs still dropping sheer into the sea. The shadow that fell from the Palatine has spread across the empire, darkening everything it touched. Tiberius is dead, but the system he inherited, the machine Augustus built, grinds on. It needs an emperor, it needs blood, it needs the sun. And the sun is coming. In Rome, the new emperor rides in procession through streets carpeted with flowers. He is 24 years old, slim and elegant, with the charisma his father Germanicus had and the cruelty his great-grandfather Augustus concealed. The people chant his childhood nickname, the name the soldiers gave him when he accompanied his father on campaign, Caligula, Little Boots. They do not know what the name will come to mean. They do not know that the boy who wears the little boots will grow into a man who wears the skin of a king. They see only the promise, the hope, the golden future that always seems to dawn when an old tyrant dies and a young prince ascends. The shadow on the wall flickers, the sun rises, and Rome, for the last time, believes in happy endings. Chapter 3. The Madness of the Sun. The sun rises over the Palatine on March 28, 37 AD, and the city of Rome holds its breath. For 24 hours, since the news of Tiberius's death arrived, the streets have pulsed with anticipation. Now finally, the new emperor appears on the palace balcony and the crowd erupts. They shout his name, Gaius, they call him, the name of his father and his grandfather, but the nickname they love is the one from childhood, Caligula, Little Boots. He waves, he smiles. He is everything Tiberius was not, young, handsome, vibrant. The people see in him the blood of Germanicus, the beloved general who died too young, poisoned, they whisper, by Tiberius's agents. They see the hope of a new Augustan age, a return to the golden days when emperors walked among men and Rome ruled the world with justice. Caligula plays his part perfectly. He honors Tiberius's memory, refusing to condemn the old tyrant publicly. He pays the legacies Augustus left the people, money that Tiberius had withheld. He recalls exiles, releases prisoners, abolishes unpopular taxes. He stages games, distributes gifts, performs the rituals of generosity that Romans expect from their rulers. For 6 months, Rome believes its dreams have come true. But in the palace, something is shifting. Caligula falls ill in October of 37 AD, a fever, the sources say, that nearly kills him. For weeks, he hovers between life and death, his body burning, his mind wandering. When he finally recovers, those closest to him notice a change. He is quicker to anger, slower to trust. He speaks of conspiracies, of enemies, of those who wished him dead. The illness may be physical, or it may be psychological. It may be the trigger that releases something latent in his blood, some inherited instability that the Julio-Claudian line carries like a curse. Whatever the cause, the Caligula who emerges from that sickbed is not the prince who rode through the flowers. He is something else, something the world will call mad. The change manifests first in small ways. He begins to demand divine honors, styling himself a king in ways that Augustus and Tiberius never dared. He orders temples built to his own divinity, statues placed in synagogues, sacrifices offered to his genius. When the Jews of Alexandria protest, he dismisses them. When the Senate hesitates, he threatens them. Then the cruelty emerges. He forces a father to watch his son's execution. He starves convicted criminals to feed to wild beasts. He reportedly expresses the wish that the Roman people had a single neck, so he could cut it all at once. The stories may be exaggerated. The sources, written by senators who hated him, are uniformly hostile, but the pattern is unmistakable. The beloved prince is becoming a monster. The madness, if it is madness, has method. Caligula understands that the Principate rests on a fiction, that the emperor is first among equals, a citizen like any other. He decides to expose the fiction by living the truth. If he is a king, he will act like one. If he has absolute power, he will use it absolutely. He humiliates the Senate, forcing senators to run beside his chariot, to kiss his feet, to grovel like slaves. He sleeps with their wives, boasts of his conquests, treats their daughters as spoils. He drains the treasury on personal extravagance, a floating palace on Lake Nemi, a bridge of boats across the Bay of Naples so he could ride his horse across the water, a campaign against the ocean itself, ordering soldiers to collect seashells as spoils of war. The last episode, The War with Neptune, captures the strange mixture of theater and insanity that defined his reign. He marches his army to the Channel coast, arrays them for battle, then suddenly orders them to attack the waves. When the soldiers hesitate, he wades in himself, striking the water with his sword. Then he orders them to collect shells, spoils of the ocean, and returns to Rome in triumph. Is he mad, or is he mocking the very concept of military glory? The sources cannot decide. Perhaps he did not know himself. In 39 AD, Caligula's sister Drusilla dies. She was, by some accounts, his favorite, perhaps his lover, certainly his confidant. He mourns her extravagantly, declares her a queen, orders a period of public mourning during which laughter, bathing, and family dining are forbidden. When a man jokes about the ban, Caligula has him tortured to death. The death of Drusilla removes the last restraint on his behavior. He becomes more erratic, more violent, more convinced of his own divinity. He appears in public dressed as Jupiter, as Hercules, as Venus. He builds a bridge between the Palatine and the Capitol so he can consult with his fellow king face to face. He reportedly talks to the moon, invites the moon into his bed, treats the natural world as his personal domain. The treasury, emptied by his extravagance, needs replenishing. He invents new taxes, confiscates property, stages show trials of wealthy men whose real crime is having money he wants. He turns the palace into a brothel, charging admission, forcing the wives and daughters of senators to serve as prostitutes. The stories may be propaganda. The senatorial class had every reason to blacken his name, but they reflect a deeper truth. Under Caligula, no one is safe, nothing is sacred, no boundary holds. In January of 41 AD, the conspiracy finally takes shape. Two tribunes of the Praetorian Guard, Cassius Chaerea and Cornelius Sabinus, decide to act. Chaerea has personal reasons. Caligula has mocked him for effeminacy, given him humiliating passwords, treated him with contempt. But the plot is broader, involving senators, equestrians, even freedmen. Everyone, it seems, wants the mad emperor dead. On January 24, during the Palatine Games, Caligula attends a theatrical performance. He is restless, distracted, perhaps already sensing danger. As he walks through a covered corridor leading from the theater to the palace, the conspirators surround him. Caligula strikes first, a sword blow to the neck. Others join in. Caligula falls, crying out, confused, asking why his guards have turned on him. He dies in the corridor, surrounded by the men who swore to protect him. His wife and daughter are killed soon after. His body is left where it falls, later given a hasty, unceremonious burial. The man who declared himself a king dies like a dog, unmourned, unmissed. In the palace, chaos reigns. The conspirators, who had no plan for what came next, mill about uselessly. The Praetorian Guard, leaderless and angry, searches for someone to proclaim. And in the shadows, behind a curtain, a middle-aged man crouches, listening to his own heart, wondering if he will live to see the next hour. His name is Claudius. He is Tiberius Claudius Nero Germanicus, brother of Germanicus, uncle of Caligula, survivor of every purge the family has endured. He stutters, he limps. The family has always treated him as an embarrassment, a fool, a harmless idiot kept alive for amusement. Now in the chaos, the guards find him. What happens next is disputed. Some say the guards dragged him from his hiding place and proclaimed him emperor on a whim. Others say he negotiated, promised them money, played on their fear of the Senate's return. Whatever the truth, Claudius emerges from behind that curtain not as a corpse, but as a claimant. The Praetorians hail him emperor. The Senate, presented with a fait accompli, reluctantly agrees. Claudius, the fool, the stutterer, the survivor, becomes the fourth emperor of Rome. And the madness, for a moment, pauses. In the corridor where Caligula died, slaves scrub the blood from the marble. They work quickly, silently, professionally. They have done this before, after Tiberius, after Sejanus, after countless nameless victims dragged from the palace in the night. They will do it again. The blood never stops flowing in the house of the Caesars. But for now there is quiet. The sun rises over the Palatine, indifferent to the dramas enacted below. The people of Rome go about their business, uncertain what the new reign will bring. They have learned, in the decades since Augustus, that hope is dangerous, that tomorrow may bring a tyrant or a king or a fool. They have learned to wait, to watch, to survive. And somewhere in the palace, Claudius sits at a desk, surrounded by papers he never expected to see. He is emperor. He is terrified. He has no idea what he will do next. The madness of the sun has ended. The shadow of the moon begins. Chapter 4: The Liar and the Sword. The boy who will become Nero grows up in the shadow of murder. His father dies when he is 3, his mother poisons his stepfather when he is 11, and his great-uncle Claudius adopts him when he is 12, not out of love, but because his mother, Agrippina, has married the emperor and maneuvered her son into the succession. Nero learns early that family is a battlefield, that love is a weapon, that survival requires constant vigilance. Agrippina is the daughter of Germanicus, the sister of Caligula, the niece of Claudius. She carries the blood of Augustus in her veins and the ambition of a dynasty in her heart. She has survived exile, poverty, and the murder of her brother. She will not let her son fail. She secures the best tutors for him, including the philosopher Seneca, the greatest mind of his generation. She arranges his marriage to Claudius's daughter Octavia. She positions him as the heir apparent, the future of Rome. In 54 AD, Claudius dies, poisoned, the sources agree, by Agrippina, who served him a dish of mushrooms at dinner. The death is quick, convenient, suspicious, but no one investigates. The Praetorians have already been bought. The Senate has already been cowed. Nero, at 17, becomes emperor of Rome. The first 5 years of Nero's reign are, by general agreement, excellent. He governs with Seneca's guidance, following the principles of moderation and justice that philosophy teaches. He reduces taxes, curbs corruption, consults the Senate. He seems, for a moment, to embody the dream of the philosopher king, the ruler who values wisdom over power, culture over conquest. Nero himself cares more about art than administration. He writes poetry, sings to the lyre, performs in private contests. He dreams of a Rome that values artists as much as soldiers, that measures greatness in beauty rather than blood. Seneca encourages these pursuits, believing that a cultured emperor is a humane emperor, that art can civilize power. But the dream has a flaw. Nero's mother, Agrippina, did not survive and schemed to watch her son play the lyre. She wants power, real power, the power she exercised during Claudius's reign and expects to exercise during Nero's. When Nero begins to assert himself, to make decisions without consulting her, to prefer his wife Octavia to his mother's candidates, Agrippina pushes back. The struggle between mother and son defines Nero's early reign. She threatens to support his stepbrother Britannicus, the true son of Claudius, as a rival claimant. Nero responds by having Britannicus poisoned at dinner, publicly, in front of witnesses. The message is clear: he will not be challenged. In 59 AD, the struggle reaches its climax. Nero decides to kill his mother. The plot is almost absurdly elaborate. He builds a collapsible boat, designed to sink when a lead weight falls from the ceiling. He invites Agrippina to a festival, embraces her warmly, sends her home on the doomed vessel. The boat collapses as planned, but Agrippina, a survivor of a dozen plots, swims to safety. She sends a messenger to Nero, reporting her escape and pretending to believe it was an accident. Nero, terrified that she will rally support against him, improvises. He sends soldiers to her villa with orders to finish the job. They find her in her bedroom, dismisses her servants with a wave. "If you have come to see me, tell Nero I am well. If you come to kill me, do your work." They do their work. She dies, according to tradition, ordering them to strike her womb, the womb that carried Nero first. Nero, when he hears the news, reportedly examines his mother's body, commenting on her features, her flaws, her mortality. He is 22 years old. He has murdered the woman who gave him life, who made him emperor, who loved him in the only way she knew how. Something in him breaks, or perhaps something is revealed. After Agrippina's death, the restraints fall away. Seneca, horrified by the murder, withdraws from active politics, spending his time writing philosophy and waiting for death. Nero, freed from guidance, pursues his passions without limit. He divorces Octavia on grounds of infertility, exiles her, then has her killed when public sympathy threatens his popularity. He marries Poppaea Sabina, the beautiful and ambitious wife of his friend Otho. He performs publicly, not just in private, but on the stage before audiences, competing as a singer and lyre player. The Roman elite, who value dignity and restraint, are horrified. An emperor who performs like a common actor degrades the office, the family, the empire itself. Nero does not care. He has discovered that absolute power means absolute freedom. He can do anything. He can be anything. He can murder his mother, divorce his wife, perform on stage, and no one can stop him. The realization is intoxicating. It is also fatal. On the night of July 18, 64 AD, fire breaks out in the shops around the Circus Maximus. The wind catches the flames, drives them through the narrow streets, consumes the tenements and temples of the city. For 6 days and 7 nights, Rome burns. When the fire finally ends, 10 of the 14 districts lie in ashes. Thousands are dead. Hundreds of thousands are homeless. The rumor spreads immediately. Nero started the fire. He wanted to clear land for his new palace, the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. He watched from the Tower of Maecenas, singing of the fall of Troy, lyre in hand, celebrating the destruction. The rumor is almost certainly false. Nero was at Antium, 30 miles away when the fire started. He returned to Rome immediately, organized relief efforts, opened public buildings to refugees, reduced the price of grain. But the rumor sticks because it feels true. Nero, the artus tempora, the matricide, the performer, of course he would make a spectacle of destruction. Needing a scapegoat, Nero blames the Christians, a small and unpopular sect. He has them arrested, tortured, executed in spectacular ways, crucified, burned as torches, fed to wild beasts in the arena. The persecutions begin a tradition of martyrdom that will fuel the church's growth for centuries, but they do not save Nero's reputation. The people believe he burned their city. The elite believe he betrayed his office. Everyone believes he is monstrous. The Golden House rises from the ashes, a palace unlike any Rome has ever seen. It covers 300 acres, with parks and lakes and vineyards in the heart of the city. Its vestibule contains a colossal statue of Nero himself, 120 feet tall. Its dining rooms have ivory ceilings that open to shower guests with flowers and perfume. Its walls gleam with gold leaf, hence the name. Nero surveys his creation and pronounces it good. "At last," he says, "I can begin to live like a human being." The irony is lost on him. He has built a monument to his own ego on the ashes of his people's homes. He has spent the treasury dry, alienated the army, provoked the Senate beyond endurance. He lives like a human being, he thinks. In truth, he lives like a king, and the kings, as Rome has learned, do not live long. In 68 AD, the provinces revolt. Gaius Julius Vindex, governor of Gaul, raises the standard of rebellion. Galba, governor of Spain, follows. The Praetorian prefect, Nero's own commander, betrays him. The Senate, finally finding courage, declares Nero a public enemy and sentences him to death. Nero wakes to find the palace empty. His guards are gone. His servants have fled. His friends, the ones who flattered him, praised his singing, laughed at his jokes, they have vanished like smoke. He wanders the empty corridors, calling for help, finding none. He flees the city with a few loyal freedmen, heading for the port of Ostia, hoping to escape to the east. But his nerve fails. He stops at a villa belonging to one of his freedmen, a country house outside Rome. There, in a small room, he waits for the horsemen he knows are coming. When he hears them approach, he takes a dagger and holds it to his throat, but he cannot do it. He hesitates, weeps, begs someone to help him. Finally, as the soldiers burst through the door, his secretary Epaphroditus guides his hand. The blade cuts deep. Nero falls, bleeding, dying. His last words, according to tradition, are "Qualis artifex perio," what an artist dies in me. The soldiers find him in a pool of blood, still twitching. They try to save him. Galba had ordered him brought alive, but it is too late. The artist is dead. The emperor is dead. The dynasty is dying with him. In Rome, the people celebrate. They put on liberty caps, run through the streets, attack statues of their former master. But the celebration is short-lived. They will soon learn that the death of Nero does not mean the return of the Republic. It means civil war. It means chaos. It means the year of the 4 emperors. And somewhere in the chaos, a new order is struggling to be born. The lyre is smashed. The sword waits. The blood will flow again before Rome finds peace. Chapter 5. The Year of the 4 Emperors. The news of Nero's death reaches Rome on June 9, 68 AD, and the city explodes with joy. For 18 years, the Julio-Claudian dynasty has ruled, first with promise, then with madness, finally with terror. Now the last of them is dead, and the people believe they are free. They put on the caps of liberated slaves. They parade through the forum. They topple Nero's statues and dance on the fragments. The Senate meets in jubilation. They declare Nero a public enemy, erase his name from public records, damn his memory to eternity. They hail Galba, the governor of Spain who led the revolt, as the new emperor. Order, they believe, is restored. They are wrong. The death of Nero does not end the civil war. It begins it. Galba is 70 years old when he enters Rome, a stern traditionalist from an old patrician family. He embodies everything Nero was not: frugal, disciplined, austere. He believes the empire needs a firm hand, a return to the old virtues, a purge of the excess and corruption that flourished under the last Julio-Claudians. But Galba lacks the one quality an emperor needs: generosity. He refuses to pay the donative the Praetorians expect from a new ruler. He punishes cities that hesitated to support him. He surrounds himself with grim advisors who share his contempt for popularity. Within months, he has alienated everyone who matters: the army, the Senate, the people. In January 69 AD, the legions in Upper Germany refused to swear loyalty to Galba. They proclaimed their own commander, Vitellius, as emperor. At the same time, Galba's ally Otho, the same Otho whose wife Nero stole, turns against him. Otho bribes the Praetorians, who have never forgiven Galba's stinginess. On January 15, they drag Galba from his litter in the forum and butcher him. His head ends up on a pole, carried around the city by mocking soldiers. Otho is emperor. He has lasted 7 months. Otho rules for 3 months. He is a very different man from Galba: charming, extravagant, popular. He pays the donative, courts the Senate, tries to win the loyalty of the provinces. But Vitellius's German legions are already marching on Italy. Otho must fight or flee. He chooses to fight. In April 69, his forces meet Vitellius's army at Bedriacum, near Cremona. The battle is bloody but decisive. Otho's troops are defeated. His cause is lost. But Otho surprises everyone. He could flee, raise new forces, continue the war. Instead, he calls his officers together and tells them he will not. "Let no one die for me," he says. "I have ruled long enough." That night, he writes letters to his family and friends, settles his affairs, and falls on his sword. He is 36 years old. Tacitus, the historian, writes that Otho's suicide earned him more glory than his life ever did. In an age of selfish ambition, a man who died to stop a civil war seemed almost noble. But the war does not stop, it only pauses. Vitellius enters Rome in triumph. He is a different kind of monster, not a tyrant like Caligula, not an artist like Nero, but a glutton, a man whose appetites define him. He feasts constantly, 4 or 5 times a day, forcing his hosts to provide ever more extravagant meals. He drains the treasury on banquets, on entertainments, on his own endless hunger. His soldiers run wild in the city, looting, raping, killing. The discipline that held the Roman army together for centuries dissolves in an orgy of violence. The people who celebrated Nero's death now pray for anyone who can restore order. They get their answer from the east. Titus Flavius Vespasian commands the legions in Judea, suppressing the Jewish revolt that began in 66 AD. He is a blunt, practical soldier, the son of a tax collector, the first emperor without senatorial ancestors. When he hears of Vitellius's excesses, he decides to act. On July 1, 69 AD, the legions in Alexandria proclaim Vespasian emperor. The legions in Judea follow. The Danubian legions, marching west, join his cause. By autumn, his forces are crossing the Alps, heading for Italy. The Second Battle of Bedriacum, in October 69, destroys Vitellius's army. His troops flee, surrender, or die. Vitellius himself, hiding in Rome, tries to abdicate, to negotiate, to save himself. His soldiers will not let him. They drag him from his hiding place, through the streets, to the Gemonian stairs, the same stairs where Sejanus's body was torn apart. The mob does the rest. They torture him, kill him, throw his body in the Tiber. He has ruled for 8 months. Vespasian enters Rome in December, greeted by a population desperate for peace. He is 60 years old, bald, plain-spoken, utterly unlike the glamorous Julio-Claudians. He does not pretend to be a king. He does not write poetry or sing to the lyre. He does what needs to be done. The first thing he does is restore order. He disbands Vitellius's mutinous troops, punishes the worst offenders, and rebuilds the Praetorian Guard with loyal soldiers. He reforms the treasury, raising money through new taxes and careful management. When his son Titus objects to a tax on public urinals, Vespasian holds a gold coin from the first payment under his nose. "Does it smell?" he asks. Titus admits it does not, and yet it comes from urine. The tax remains. He begins rebuilding Rome. The Golden House, that monument to Nero's ego, is demolished. In its place, Vespasian builds something for the people, the Flavian Amphitheater, which posterity will call the Colosseum. It seats 50,000 spectators and offers free games, a gift to the populace, a symbol of the new dynasty's generosity. He rules for 10 years, competently, quietly, without madness. When he dies in 79 AD, he jokes on his deathbed, "Vi puto Deus fio." Alas, I think I am becoming a king. It is the last laugh of a man who never took himself too seriously, who knew that emperors are mortal, that power passes, that the only thing that matters is doing the job well. The year of the 4 emperors ends where it began, with a corpse in the Tiber, a new ruler on the Palatine, and a people too exhausted to celebrate. Galba, Otho, Vitellius, 3 emperors in 12 months, each dead by violence, each erased by the next. The dynasty that Augustus founded, that Tiberius preserved, that Caligula and Nero disgraced, is finally gone. The Flavians rule now. The blood of the Julio-Claudians has run dry. But the question that haunted Augustus in his final hours remains. Can the system survive without the family? Can Rome be ruled by mere men, by soldiers and tax collectors, by those who rise through talent rather than birth? Vespasian thinks so. He will prove it for a time. Yet the madness is not gone. It is in the walls of the Palatine, in the stones of the Forum, in the memory of a people who have seen too much. It will return in Domitian, in Commodus, in 100 emperors yet unborn. The line between king and monster, between ruler and tyrant, between order and chaos, that line is not in the blood. It is in the power itself. Absolute power does not corrupt absolutely because it is evil. It corrupts absolutely because it is impossible. No human can bear the weight of kinghood. No human should try. In the quiet of his country villa, Vespasian tends his garden. He is old now, nearing the end, and he has earned the right to rest. His son Titus will succeed him, and Titus's brother Domitian after that. The Flavian dynasty will have its own madness, its own horrors, its own blood. But that is for later. For now, there is only the soil, the sun, the simple satisfaction of a job done well. He thinks of Augustus, the first emperor, the man who invented this impossible system. Did he know what he was unleashing? Did he understand that the Principate, his beautiful compromise between republic and monarchy, would spawn Caligula and Nero, would drown the world in blood, would make kings of madmen and madmen of kings? Perhaps he did. Perhaps he had no choice. The republic was dying, something had to replace it. Augustus chose the only path he saw. The rest was fate, or fortune, or the will of the kings, kings who, Vespasian knows, are just stories we tell ourselves to make the darkness bearable. He pulls a weed, tosses it aside, and reaches for another. The sun warms his back. The soil crumbles in his hands. The empire for this moment is at peace. It will not last, it never lasts, but for now it is enough.